This is the Internet Court of Truth and Lies. What it's about is if you see something in the media that you think is the truth or you think it's a lie, and you wonder what other people think, then you can go to the Internet Court of Truth and be a plaintiff in a trial where you can have up to 8 jurors. There's a standard set of 8 verdict questions that everybody has to answer. The questions are never the right questions for the content, but they are questions that are fundamental to any truth or lie. The questions are not necessarily the perfect set of questions that need to be asked, but it does keep the dialogue on track. Most of what happens on the internet today in terms of comments and so forth that people make is they're just saying anything. The Internet Court of Truth and Lies uses this concept called forced moderated dialogue. In fact, there is a picture of a person named George Washington who, and in the formation of the Constitution, created a set of places where there's enforced moderated dialogue. So the court system is enforced dialogue that's structured in a certain way. The House of Representatives enforced moderated dialogue that's structured in a certain way. The Senate, same way. And by the way, the executive is supposed to be that way too. George Washington said it's impossible at the time to write some laws to guarantee that democracy can't be destroyed if people are willing to lie divisively. He said that directly. That is the main theme of his farewell address. It turns out I've been arguing for years there needs to be a way in law to put in jail people who divisively lie or punish them. George Washington said there was no way in law to do that, which he was probably correct back 250 years ago, but he's not correct anymore today. The picture that I'm showing right now is a picture I had Grok do, which is Andrew Weissmann, who wrote a book that was just published recently called Liar's Kingdom, where he's arguing the same thing. He argues for a proposal that he's got. He was with the Department of Justice, a very high level person as a prosecutor. He put a few corporate heads in jail for lying. He also recognizes that brazen lying is the way you can actually destroy your democracy, and you have to put some laws in place. He came up with a fairly brilliant set of 3 laws that he'd like to have passed that are modifications of existing laws that would ultimately, if necessary, put a liar in jail. But the first punishment is you can't run for office. He's got 2 levels of it. One of them is you can't run for office for 8 years. And the other one is you can never run for office. George Washington didn't have that as an option because what people said were not being broadcast to everybody else. So you couldn't actually trap people in any meaningful way when there was no mass communication going on except printed books and so forth and so on. So what you've got on the screen there are the 3 people I know who've suggested that there be ways to pass laws. The problem that democracies always have, the ones that are attempting to preserve freedom, always have is that divisive liars can win as the president or whatever of the democracy and take over and turn it into a dictatorship. Now, there is an argument that there's a 4th person who said this, which is Plato, who said that all democracies fail into oligarchies and all oligarchies fail into dictatorships because people are willing to lie. Plato wrote that at something like 1000 BC or something. I forget where Plato was around, maybe the hundreds of BC. The book that he said that in is The Republic. So there may be a 4th person, but Plato wasn't suggesting laws or even entertaining laws that prevent such people to gain access to the control of the democracy. So I think the three pictures you have is me, Weissmann, and George Washington. My case is that we're right. And if you don't believe me, believe Weissmann. And if you don't believe Weissmann, believe George Washington. That is my whole case. I'm going to go over my verdicts and then ask for a 20, 30 second for each of the jurors to go over whether they agree with my verdicts. I'm saying what Weissmann said, device and brazen political lying is at the heart of the collapse of the U.S. democracy, they say, any democracy. It's also why stopping it should be in the law. George Washington said it should be, but it can't be. Weissmann said it should be, and here's the laws. And I said it should be, and here's the law, which is a different law. My law is one that I think is much simpler, which is that any candidate for office must go into a 1 hour session live on essentially TV or video. It's public, where certain questions are asked of him under penalty of perjury, using the standard perjury in law. If he's caught lying, he should be banned from candidacy. That was my simple one, was just make it public and to everybody. And so then you can see each of the candidates for office being asked a set of questions. My argument is that we can suggest some ideas of questions, but those questions need to be studied. There are questions that you could ask that would catch a brazen liar. He must answer those questions as they must, unless he takes the fifth, in which case everybody's watching him take the fifth on the questions. So that informs the public this guy's a probable liar because he knew what the questions were going to be. That's the argument. And I'm going to go over my verdicts. Is it the truth? I believe human lying is truly at the fault in the loss of our democracy, of any democracy. I completely believe it. I spent some years studying human lying, and boy, once you see what you're looking at, you realize that George Washington was right, and Weissmann has similarly come to the same view from a different background and a heck of a better. I'm not a lawyer at all. Is the whole truth? I said, yes, exactly what the law should be. Weissmann's got his suggestion. I've got my suggestion. George Washington said at the time he didn't see a way to do it. And I agree with him. George Washington, at that time, there was not a really good way to do it. But nowadays, there are good ways to do it. Is it nothing but the truth? I said yes. This argument is so clean, I think. Now, we don't have the questions yet, but it is pretty easy to come up with pretty good questions. What you'd like to have is a rolling set of questions that the public is seeing, so they know what these questions will be. And this is for any candidate in any office. Now, for the federal laws, they only deals with federal candidacies. There are some states with some limited laws that exist like this. Brazil passed some laws that were like this, and Weissmann's book goes through some other countries that have passed laws like these, and they've been successful. Particularly the success was in Brazil, and that's in our lifetimes. Plus the deceit, I said that there's just simply no deceit here. I'm not lying. Is the deceit or truth intended? I said the truth is intended. What's the motivation? I said it's to be informative. I say it from a science point of view. George Washington said it from his incredible understanding of politics. Most people don't know this, but George Washington refused to be a part of any party. There was, in his time, the equivalent of a Democrat and a Republican party established. and he refused to be a part of a party precisely for the reason that you're seeing, which is he saw people lying and they saw them winning elections when he believed that they should. What's the motivation? It's to be informative. What's the social acceptability of the truth or lie? I think it's essential this message should get out and law should be adjusted to keep the brazen and divisive lying under control. I agree with Weissmann. I came to the same view, completely independent of him, completely independent of George Washington. And Weissmann evidently didn't reference George Washington, which was amazing to me. I suspect he's read the farewell address, but it was probably so many years ago, he forgot what it was about. What label would improve the social acceptability of the truth or lie? I said no label needed. So that's basically my case. It's a very simple case from the point of view of you either believe George Washington, me, and Andrew Weissmann, or you don't. Not believing me is immaterial. Not believing Weissmann is significant because he actually really does know what he's talking about and has put very high in the oligarchy people in jail for lying under civil laws and criminal laws. And George Washington, this is the main theme of his farewell address when he said, this is the one thing I need to tell everybody, please do not vote for a divisive liar. There's nothing we can do to stop the loss of the democracy if you vote for these guys. I'm making the case based on the fact that just the three of us have said that. Possibly Plato said it. It's easy to find in the Republic where he says this. They knew it back then that you could lose democracy that way. What I want to do is go through the jurors. So juror one.
I agree with you, and I also agree with some of the verdict answers and stuff like that, because like Teresa had put in the chat earlier about the First Amendment, the problem with the freedom of speech is it means they are free to lie. And I can agree
That's
with
actually
that.
not true. Under oath, you're not.
But then the limitations currently extant with regard to 1A speech is what Brian said on it. But what really got me when I was reading the verdicts of the jurors was number 8, the label. That could not have been any more truer. They said lies or something other needs to come with a stress test or something other to that point. But anyone who tells a lie has got to be under a lot of stress, because if you're cool and calm and collected, you wouldn't be stressed. You're stressed because you're covering up something.
Okay. So juror 2.
Hi, that's me, Bob. I think I agree with you, Bob. We need to have checks and balances in place in democracies worldwide. The fact that you're proposing it for the US, that is...
Weissmann's book is a really good read. You can get it in any sort of format. He goes through other countries that have actually done this, and they've been successful.
Like Brazil. Okay.
Like Brazil, yeah. He states that he's modeled his proposal on what's already happened in Brazil, and it was successful to divert the dictatorship.
It's just that divisive political lying is one of the things that causes the collapse of democracy. It's not the only reason at the heart of the collapse.
So the argument we're making is it's not necessarily sufficient, but it is necessary.
Okay.
So
Yes.
you'll never not find it, but it's not sufficient. We're not saying it's necessary and sufficient.
It's not going to save democracy.
It's not going to save democracy there, but whenever democracy fails, you'll find that there was somebody who was taking control, who was lying divisively.
Yeah. Thanks.
Juror 3.
That's me. I believe that your accusation is totally correct. Just how are they going to go about stopping it?
Yeah. And my argument is there really needs to be a commission in any country that goes about working out the details of how their country can accept the laws on this. And there are enough examples. Weissman's book's a great book where he discusses it as a lawyer. I just see it a different way. I see it as fundamental. You can't get rid of it. I forgot which it was earlier said, if you're stressed, your brain will come up with lies. It will come up with ways to divisively lie, and it's very easy to do it. So people will fall into that, and they just need to know it's illegal.
I'm hurt by that. By that.
Oh, okay, so juror 4.
Yeah, that's me. First and foremost, I agree completely that political lying is a terrible, horrible thing, and it's behind a ton of our cultural issues. That being said, with regard to Weissman's first point or first legislative proposal that would fail the First Amendment test right off the bat, it's a limitation on political speech that just can't be done. And it's because of the fact that it would require anyone who knowingly makes false, fictitious, or fraudulent statement of representation. There's actually Supreme Court jurisprudence on this. It's a case from 1982 that says the state's fear that voters might make an ill-advised choice does not provide the state with a compelling justification for limiting speech. It is not the government's function to select which issues are worth discussing in the course of a political campaign. And that's a case from 1982, but it's still in pretty good standing. So with regard to the first, it's just going to flat out fail. And the second one, with regard to having them publicly certify, it's going to be a similar infringement on the right to be a public candidate, a candidate for public office. It's not going to make the cut. Now, that being said, I love these ideas. These are great ideas. And I wish that we could push these forward, and they may even be worth trying to push forward in order to reclassify certain First Amendment protections in light of the amount of disinformation that exists.
Yeah, I did look a little bit further into the George Washington's farewell address. This was years ago.
Yeah.
When he said there's no law that we could pass,
yeah,
that was actively debated. Their arguments were very similar to yours, the first one of yours.
Yeah.
Which is that they couldn't do it. They couldn't come up with a way to put the law that wouldn't restrict freedom of speech. And this is before they had amendments, right?
Yeah.
Before the first. What's interesting is you can go back and see your first argument was argued. And basically, they basically said we can't do the law. George Washington was one of the ones who was most appalled by the fact that the divisive liars were winning the elections.
Yeah.
He was just appalled. That's the reason he wrote his little farewell address.
Yeah, I don't like the argument that the Constitution is a living document. However, our culture is a living thing, and we should always legislatively and jurisprudentially attempt to deal with cultural issues. So thank you.
Yeah. Juror 5.
Yeah, Juror 5 is me. I find it's all very curious. I think the very existence of truth court shows us that lying has shades and shallows to it, that there's nothing very clear. And the idea of creating legislation that could define the instances of what a liar is and the importance of what that lie is, or that liar is, I just don't believe you could do it. It would become a burden of sort of censorship on people which is untenable. And I agree with Brian.
Be my argument against Weinstein, but not my argument against my proposal.
All right, yeah.
Just put it on TV. Yeah.
Yes, but the other thing is that your proposal is already in place.
Congressional
committees. We have congressional committees at which you can be tried for perjury and have up. But the British Parliament
candidates do not have to appear in front of candidates. We do not require that every candidate for office appear in front of Congress.
No, all right, but all you have to do is set up a congressional meeting to do this. I mean, everything is in place. The concept of perjury.
They'll just refuse to take the oath.
Okay, then, but that's saying that it's visible to everyone, just as you were saying that would be in the trial. The point about perjury before the government committees does exist, and it could be used and just simply expanded if you wanted to do that. The question of lying is simply too difficult because it's not true, not validated, it misses out pathways to truth and things like that. It's too ephemeral to make some concrete kind of proposals for legislation and things like that. I think what we need is more challenge. We need the fourth estate to properly challenge. Why is it that not a single reporter, when they're interviewing Trump, says, "But Mr. Trump, you lied about that"? They're never challenged. We don't have any, there's no culture, certainly not in the States.
I've seen reporters actually do that, and Trump just calls them an
there was
ugly word.
certainly
and
there was
walks
that
away
recent
from
interview with that woman reporter, I forget her name. Yes, she was good, and he walked out. There should be more of that. And the other thing is, reporters should invite the president into their tent for interviews, so that the place is theirs, not his, not the White House. It should be in the reporter's control, and that if he behaves badly, then the reporters can really get at him. At the moment, he can just say, "I'm not talking to you. Go away."
I know for
the
sure.
White House is in control of the reporting of the press.
I know for sure candidates refuse to talk to reporters. Period. They give statements.
Yeah.
And they answer questions.
And then why don't we have on every newspaper, the front page publishing, here's a column, here are the questions we asked, and here are the responses, blank page. There's no real engagement with attacking the statements of the politicians. Yeah. That's what we need. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's a free press, sadly. I think it's a great thing to have for state, but you're right. In my opinion, they should be taking vastly more responsibility.
Yeah.
So Juror 6.
Hi, hello everyone. Juror 6 here. Okay, so it looks like I completely misunderstood the case because my summary is completely different to what you guys are saying, but I can read it anyway if you guys don't mind. Okay, so I think this review argues that Liars Kingdom correctly highlights how political lies can threaten democracy, but it believes the problem is more complex than the book suggests. The reviewer explains the book is more complex. The reviewer explains that people believe and spread misinformation because of factors like group identity and media influence, not just because politicians lie. While the book supports stronger legal accountability for dishonest politicians, the review argues that this should be combined with better civic education and responsible media. Overall, it concludes that protecting democracy requires both legal reforms and broader social change. And for those wondering, the reviewer is Klaus Michael, a writer and cultural critic. He wrote a review as part of the companion commentary to Andrew Weissmann, Liars Kingdom. Rather than simply praising or criticizing the book, he builds on Weissmann's idea by arguing that legal reforms alone won't solve the problem of political lying. Thank you.
So what you just said, which is really interesting, is most of what George Washington said when he talked about the one thing he had to talk about for this farewell address, which was 95% of the farewell address. Most of what he said exactly what you're saying, which is that the other pieces of society that are positive, need to be supported, because you can't pass laws against lying. He said you have to look to the other pieces of society to overcome the liars and give people options. And he says that very explicitly. That reviewer was probably unaware of this, was very much what George Washington said. He said, you can't do anything about it, sorry, but you need to do about all these other things and support them, and then that will help preserve the democracy. So it's interesting that that guy was saying that. So Juror 7.
Hi, Bob. My stance is basically the same as Juror 2, where it says that divisive present political lying is not necessarily at the heart of the collapse of US democracy. It's one of the issues, but it's not necessarily the biggest issue. I do understand where you're coming from, and I do agree with you, but I don't know. It's just ridiculous to me that the words democracy and lying, and for the lack of a better word, normalized lying, is in the same sentence. Yeah.
And yet it is. Juror 8.
Hey, I would like to say the book argues that deliberate and repeated political lying has seriously damaged democracy in the United States. It claims that when leaders knowingly spread false information, public trust in government, elections, and the media declines. The author believes that intentional deception should have legal consequences to protect democracy, encourage honesty in public office, and hold leaders accountable for misleading the public. Thank you.
Yeah, the problem is how do you do that with additions to the law? And some of us have tried to suggest there are potential solutions to that. I don't know how to say this, but I actually like what Weissmann was suggesting, even though they may fail. I'll be interested to find out if I can get Weissmann to actually talk to me and find out whether he's had people convince him that his book was wrong. We do have another Weissmann trial. It's a week after next. So we'll see how this goes. I swear I'm going to stop having Weissmann trials. I think I'm going to wind up having 5 of them because he's one of the few people who came to the same conclusion that I came to a long time ago. That's about it. Next week is a trial on a journalist whose name is Dylan Kombelik, and he's an American who was in the intelligence agencies before he retired and married somebody in Ukraine. He lives in Kiev, and he produces some of the best journalism out there on American democracy. He's got a YouTube and Kiev, really good views about what's actually going on. Good in the sense that he documents what he's saying. That's going to be the trial next week. Okay, so we'll see y'all.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi.
Bye,
Bye.
y'all. Happy 4th.
Bye,
Happy
everyone.
4th or whatever.
All right.
Yeah.
We'll see y'all.
Bye.
All right. So who's following the football, everybody?
I only played a little bit.
I
I
am.
actually like soccer better than anything else in the world, but I don't call it football. I call it
Oh, I was
soccer.
going to say, that's right. They call it football over there, don't they?
Sorry. Yeah, my mistake.
The rest of the
Soccer.
world calls it football, by the way. It's just the US that calls it soccer.
I know. Yeah, so
Have a great week.
y'all too.
Yeah, all right. Bye,
Bye.
everyone.